"The house is just too crowded, Mom. You need more professional care at a retirement home." Those were the words my own son said as he pushed my already packed suitcase toward the front door. I didn't argue. I just quietly picked up the framed photograph of my late husband, the father he'd always held in awe. The moment I stepped out onto the street, a jet-black Lincoln Navigator was already waiting. A powerful man got out, my husband's oldest and dearest friend. Through the window, I saw my son's smug expression crumble, replaced by a silent, bone-chilling horror. He realized, in that one terrible moment, that he hadn't just kicked out his mother, he'd kicked out the key to his entire inheritance. My name is Linda. I'm a widow in my 60s, living a quiet life in the suburbs now, and this is the story of how my late husband helped me take back everything from our only son. If this story touches your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to listen to more meaningful life stories with us. Your support is our biggest motivation to keep sharing. The early morning mist of an October dawn still clung to the velvet rose petals in my little garden. I gripped the cold steel of the pruning shears in my hand, but even the chill couldn't seem to chase away the familiar warmth I felt from this patch of earth. This was Walter's garden, his whole world. Every rose bush, every petunia plant, was planted by his own 2 hands. After Walter passed on from this world, I used his life insurance money, one last, thoughtful provision from him, to buy this house by the lake. It wasn't because it was fancy or grand, but because it had a garden big enough for me to keep his spirit close, right here beside me. The Sunday morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and the sweet perfume of the roses at their peak. I took a deep breath, feeling a fragile peace fill my chest. Birds were chirping somewhere in the old oak tree, and the lake in the distance shimmered like a silver mirror under the first rays of sunlight. Walter would have loved a morning like this. He'd have brewed a pot of hot tea, brought it out to the wooden swing we built together, and the 2 of us would have just sat there, quietly watching everything we had created. The memory washed over me like a gentle wave, and a small smile touched my lips. But the smile hadn't even fully formed before it was shattered by a sharp, cutting sound that broke the perfect silence. "Mom, can you come inside for a second? Michael and I need to talk to you." It was Jessica's voice. A voice that was clear and high-pitched, but to me, it always lacked a certain warmth. It was like the clinking of fine crystal, pretty to the ear, but with an underlying coldness and fragility. I slowly pushed myself up, feeling that familiar twinge in my knees. Old age catches up to us all, doesn't it? But this physical ache was nothing compared to the invisible scrapes on my heart. I stuck the shears in my gardening basket, brushed the damp soil from my hands, and walked toward the back door. The house greeted me with a blast of cold air, a stark contrast to the warm, loving atmosphere it had when Walter was still alive. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, had what you'd call a modern aesthetic. She convinced my son, Michael, that the house needed to be updated to be more contemporary. And just like that, the warm, cream-colored walls were painted a stark, sterile gray. The soft leather sofa where Walter used to sit and read the paper every evening was replaced by a sharp, angular sectional, minimalist to the point of being cruel. The colorful Persian rugs we'd collected on our travels vanished, making way for cold, polished hardwood floors. But what broke my heart the most were the photographs. All the framed moments that chronicled our family's precious history. Our wedding day, Michael's first steps, our trip to Disneyland. All of it was packed away by Jessica into boxes and shoved deep into the storage closet. In their place were soulless, abstract paintings, splashes of color that she called sophisticated and deep. The soul of this house had been ripped out. Even Walter's portrait, I had to fight tooth and nail just to keep it in a humble spot on the mantelpiece, looking completely out of place in the foreign space she'd created. I stepped into the living room. Michael was sitting on that gray sofa, his hands clasped between his knees, his eyes glued to the floor as if it held some magnetic power. My boy, the son I had spent my entire life loving and protecting, looked so small and pathetic right then. His shoulders were slumped. The broad back that was once my rock was now hunched over as if carrying an invisible weight. He wouldn't look at me. A sense of dread, like a cold snake, slithered into my heart. Jessica, on the other hand, stood next to him, a complete contrast. She wore a silk dress the color of jade that clung to her perfect figure. Her blonde hair was swept up in an elegant bun, showing off a proud neck and sparkling diamond earrings. She stood with her arms crossed, the posture of someone in complete control of the situation. When she saw me walk in, a smile spread across her red lips, a smile practiced in front of a mirror, flawless but utterly devoid of warmth. "Have a seat, Mom," Jessica said, her voice sickeningly sweet. She pointed to the armchair facing Michael. I sat down quietly, feeling the cold leather against my back. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. I could hear the steady ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner, one of the last relics of Walter's that Jessica hadn't gotten around to throwing out. Each tick felt like a hammer blow against my tightening chest. Finally, Jessica cleared her throat, beginning a speech I was sure she had rehearsed for a long, long time. "Mom," she began, her eyes glistening with a fake sympathy. "Michael and I have been doing a lot of thinking lately. We're truly very worried about you." I stayed silent, waiting. A mother's intuition was screaming at me that something terrible was about to happen. The kids, Leo and Sophia, they're getting bigger every day. They need space to run around, to develop fully. This house, to be perfectly honest, is getting a bit cramped for a family of 4, plus you. Jessica spoke slowly, carefully choosing each word. "I know you love the garden, but taking care of it is getting to be too much for you. And besides, your health. At this age, you really need more professional care, a place with a medical team on call 24/7 to make sure everything is all right." Every word she spoke was like a needle piercing my heart. Cramped? This 5-bedroom house was cramped? Needed professional care? I still drove myself to the grocery store every day. I still tended my garden. My health was perfectly fine. This wasn't concern. This was a verdict. An eviction notice wrapped up in pretty, flowery words. My throat felt dry as a bone. I turned to Michael, hoping to find some resistance, some hesitation, any sign that my son did not agree with this cruelty. "Michael, you think so too?" Michael still didn't look up. He just mumbled, his voice lost in shame and cowardice. "Mom, Jessica's right. We just want what's best for you." "What's best for me?" I repeated, my voice beginning to tremble, not from fear, but from a bitter disappointment rising in my throat. "What's best for me is being kicked out of my own home. The home your father left for me?" "No one's kicking you out," Jessica cut in quickly, her tone now tinged with impatience. She walked over to the coffee table, picked up a glossy, color-printed brochure, and placed it in my hands. "We've found a wonderful place for you. It's a high-end retirement community. It has a swimming pool, a gym, social clubs. You'll have so many friends your own age. Look, the rooms are beautiful. They even have balconies overlooking the Pine Hills." I looked down at the brochure. The vibrant pictures, the fake, smiling faces of the elderly, assaulted my eyes. The Serenity Meadows Retirement Community. The name was a cruel joke. It looked like a gilded cage, a place where people dumped their loved ones who had become a burden. A wave of nausea rolled in my stomach. I pushed the brochure aside. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, trying my best to keep my voice steady. "This is my home." Jessica let out a long sigh, the patient facade completely gone, replaced by a cold, brazen audacity. "Mom, please don't make this any more difficult than it has to be. Everything has already been decided." And then, my eyes happened to drift toward the front door. My heart stopped. There, right by the entrance, was my suitcase. My green canvas suitcase that Walter had given me on our 30th wedding anniversary. It was packed. The handle was extended, ready to be wheeled away. A horrifying truth hit me like a bolt of lightning. This wasn't a discussion. It was an announcement. Everything had been arranged behind my back. They had packed my bags. They had chosen my nursing home. They had planned out the rest of my life without even asking me. The shock was so great I couldn't breathe. It felt like all the strength had been drained from my body. I stared at the suitcase, then back at Michael. This time, my son finally looked up. In his eyes, I didn't see malice, but a weakness so profound it was pitiful. I saw the conflict, the guilt, but above all, the powerlessness. He had been completely manipulated by his cunning wife. He had chosen her, chosen his own convenience over the mother who had given birth to and raised him. The pain was no longer like needles. It was a knife twisting deep and mercilessly in my heart. What kind of man had I raised? Walter, if you were here, how disappointed would you be in our son? I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I think Jessica was expecting that, so she would have another reason to claim I was mentally unstable. No, I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. A frightening calm washed over me. I slowly stood up, each movement feeling as if my limbs were made of lead. I didn't look at Jessica anymore. Her existence, in that moment, meant nothing to me. I just looked at Michael, looked deep into his eyes so he could see the utter devastation in his mother's. "You've really grown up, Michael," I said, my voice hoarse, devoid of any emotion. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned and walked, like a sleepwalker, toward the fireplace. My trembling hand lifted the frame holding Walter's photograph. His face in the picture was still smiling, that gentle smile, his warm eyes looking at me, as if trying to comfort me. I clutched the frame to my chest. This was the only thing I needed. This was all I had left. I walked past Jessica, toward the front door. I picked up my handbag from the shoe rack. I didn't even glance at the suitcase. They could take the house, they could take the assets, but they couldn't take my memories or my dignity. As I put my hand on the doorknob, a weak voice came from behind me. "Mom." It was Michael. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't look at his face for another second. I called a cab for you. It'll be here in 5 minutes." That sentence, that one final, pathetic gesture of false concern, was the straw that broke the camel's back. It extinguished the last, tiniest spark of hope in my heart. My son didn't just agree to kick me out. He'd arranged the transportation to make sure I left quickly. I didn't say another word. I opened the door and stepped outside. The bright sunlight made me squint. The front door clicked shut behind me with a dry, final sound. It was like the fall of a guillotine, severing my connection to this house, to the family I once thought was mine. I stood on the curb, clutching Walter's picture, lost and alone. I was a widow, a mother abandoned by her own son, a homeless woman in her 60s. Where was I to go in this wide world? I had no idea. In that moment, all I felt was an endless, hollow emptiness. I stood there, on the sidewalk in front of the house that was once mine, clutching Walter's portrait to my aching chest. The cold glass pressed against my skin, but it was nothing compared to the ice spreading from the depths of my soul. The world around me seemed to warp. Sounds grew distant, and my vision blurred through a thin film of unshed tears. The rustle of leaves in the wind, the cheerful laughter of a child from a neighbor's yard, all the familiar sounds of daily life now felt foreign and mocking. I was a solitary island in the rushing river of existence, a shattered piece broken off from the warm family portrait I had spent a lifetime painting. The cab Michael had called was probably on its way. The thought brought a bitter taste to my mouth. Where would I go? What destination would I give the driver? A hotel? The home of an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years? Each option felt like an admission of failure, a public declaration of my miserable circumstances. I had nowhere to go. For the first time in my 60-odd years, I was truly homeless. The brutal reality of it was a crushing weight, pulling my shoulders down, threatening to buckle my knees right there on the pavement. Just as I was sinking into that abyss of despair, a large, dark shadow slid silently to a stop right beside me. It was a jet-black Lincoln Navigator. The paint was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting my own distorted, pathetic image. It looked nothing like the cars that usually pass through our quiet neighborhood. It exuded a quiet power and luxury, like a panther hiding in the shade, watching its prey. A flicker of fear ran through me. Was Jessica not satisfied yet? Had she sent someone to make sure I really left? The driver's side door opened softly, almost without a sound. A man stepped out. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair cut neatly and a perfectly tailored gray suit. Though age had left creases around his eyes, his gaze was firm and clear. His entire demeanor radiated the calm confidence of a man accustomed to being in charge. He wasn't an errand boy. He was a commander. The man walked around the front of the car and approached me. Every step was steady and deliberate. He stopped a few feet away, maintaining a respectful distance, and gave a slight nod. "Good morning, Linda," he said, His voice was deep and warm, carrying a strange sense of reassurance. "My name is Sam Harrison. I was a friend of Walter's." That name, Sam Harrison. It was like a long-forgotten key that suddenly unlocked a dusty corner of my memory. Walter had mentioned that name before. Not often, but always with a special kind of respect. They were best friends from college, had gone through the tough early years of starting their businesses together. Walter once told me that Sam had saved his company from a lawsuit that nearly drove them into bankruptcy. "Sam is a friend you can trust with your life," my husband had said. But after Walter got sick, old connections seemed to fade away. I hadn't heard that name in years. I was stunned, staring at the man before me, trying to make sense of it. How was he here, right now, like a phantom from the past? As if reading the confusion in my eyes, Sam continued, his voice calm. "Walter told me a great deal about you. I've always kept an eye on his family from a distance. It was a promise I made to an old friend. When I heard that something unfortunate had just happened, I came immediately." He didn't ask me what had happened. He didn't need to. His eyes glanced at my distraught face, my hands clutching the photograph, the closed door behind me, and he understood everything. That unspoken understanding was worth more than 1,000 empty words of comfort. It told me I didn't have to explain, didn't have to recount my pain and humiliation. He already knew, and he was here. "I think you could use some help," Sam said. It was a statement, not a question. He reached out and gently opened the rear passenger door. "Please, get in. Let's get you away from here first." I hesitated for a second. Get into a car with a man I barely knew? But then I looked into his eyes. They were honest eyes, the eyes of Walter's friend. The trust I had in my late husband seemed to extend to his best friend, and I had no other options. Staying here was far more frightening than any uncertainty that lay ahead. I nodded, unable to speak. I walked forward, and with surprising gentleness, Sam took my elbow and helped me into the plush back seat. He closed the door softly and returned to the driver's seat. The car pulled away smoothly, leaving the familiar street behind, leaving behind the house that held all my joy and all my pain. I didn't look back. Inside the car, it was a different world. The silence was nearly absolute, insulated from all the noise of the outside. The faint scent of high-quality leather hung in the air. I still clutched Walter's photograph as if it were a life raft. The car didn't head toward the noisy city center. Instead, it drove toward the hills, where sprawling mansions were tucked away among the trees. The road climbed higher and higher, and soon the entire city was spread out below us, sparkling like a carpet woven from lights. Sam said nothing during the drive, and I was grateful for that. He gave me space to breathe, to try to piece together the shattered fragments of my mind. His silence wasn't indifference, it was a profound form of respect. Occasionally I'd glance at him in the rearview mirror. The way he focused on the road, his steady hands on the wheel, all of it radiated dependability. Finally, the car turned onto a private road that led to a skyscraper of glass and steel, gleaming in the afternoon sun. Sam drove directly into a private underground garage and parked in a reserved spot. He led me to a private elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. The elevator doors opened into a small, marble-floored foyer. There was only one door. Sam inserted a key and opened it. He stepped aside to let me pass. "After you," he said. I stepped inside hesitantly, and then I gasped. I was standing in a massive penthouse. 3 of the living room walls were floor-to-ceiling plate glass windows, opening up to a breathtaking panoramic view of the majestic Rocky Mountains in the distance. The snow-capped peaks glittered under the sun, looking eternal and serene. The golden afternoon light poured into the room, bathing everything in a warm, amber glow. The space was decorated with exquisite taste and luxury, but it wasn't gaudy. A grand piano stood in one corner. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves were filled with old, leather-bound books, and a deep brown leather sofa looked incredibly inviting. This place wasn't like Jessica's cold showroom. It radiated the warmth and depth of a well-lived, intelligent life. "This place, it's unbelievable," I whispered, still overwhelmed by the sight. Sam gave a small smile. "Walter loved this view too. He said it helped you realize just how small your own problems really are." He walked over to a small bar in the corner. "Can I get you some tea?" I think it might help you calm down. I nodded. Sam prepared the tea with practiced, efficient movements. A few moments later, he brought over 2 steaming cups, releasing the gentle aroma of chamomile. He placed 1 cup in front of me on the solid wood coffee table and sat in the armchair opposite me. "Linda," he began, his voice still calm, "I know you must have a million questions. Please, allow me to explain." And so he told me. He told me about the debt of gratitude he always felt toward Walter. Years ago, Sam's company had been on the brink of bankruptcy due to a bad investment and the betrayal of a business partner. He had lost everything: his money, his reputation, and nearly his family. It was Walter who, without a moment's hesitation, had used his own personal assets to co-sign a loan for Sam, helping him rebuild his company from the ashes. "Walter didn't just save my career," Sam said, his gaze distant, fixed on the mountains. "He saved my life. He believed in me when no one else did. That's a debt I can never fully repay." So, I promised him, and I promised myself, that I would always look out for his family, especially you. He explained that he had his own connections and had learned that Michael was struggling with his business and that Jessica was putting immense pressure on him. He had a bad feeling about where things were headed. This morning, when one of his sources told him a small moving truck had been at my house, followed by a call for a cab, he knew the worst had happened. He came immediately. After he finished his story, I didn't know what to say. The tears I had been holding back all morning finally streamed down my cheeks. But these weren't tears of humiliation. They were tears of gratitude and profound emotion. Just when I felt abandoned by the entire world, an old friend of my husband, a near stranger to me, had appeared and extended a hand. His loyalty and integrity were like a warm flame, thawing my frozen heart. "Thank you, Sam," I said through my tears. I don't know what I would have done without you." Sam put his teacup down. He looked directly at me, his eyes filled with determination. "You don't need to thank me, Linda. This is what I had to do for Walter, and you don't need to worry about anything anymore." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the magnificent view. Walter was a brilliant man. He was always several steps ahead of everyone else. He loved you more than anything in this world, and he would never, ever let you be taken advantage of. Sam turned back to me, a sharp glint in his eye. "This fight is just beginning, and you won't be fighting it alone." He gestured to the luxurious space around us. "From now on, consider this your home, our headquarters. Get some rest, Linda. Tomorrow we start taking back everything that belongs to you." His words were filled with power. They weren't just comforting. They were a promise, a declaration of war. For the first time all day, a feeling other than pain and despair began to flicker inside me. It was a spark of hope. A tiny spark, but bright enough to illuminate the dark path ahead. I knew then that even though I had been cast out by my son, I was not alone. I had an ally, a savior from the past, and perhaps the protection of Walter from a place far, far away. That first night in Sam's penthouse, I barely slept. Sleep came in fits and starts, shattered by formless nightmares and the whispers of the past. I lay in the plush, king-sized bed, surrounded by soft silk sheets, but I felt more alone and adrift than ever. The glittering cityscape outside the enormous glass window was like a foreign galaxy, beautiful but indifferent. It wasn't the warm yellow glow from a neighbor's porch light, not the chirping of crickets in Walter's garden. This luxury, however safe, was still a gilded cage. I was just a guest, a refugee in my own life. I woke up as the first streaks of sunlight began to paint the distant mountain peaks pink. The physical exhaustion was nothing compared to the depletion of my soul. I sat up, hugging my knees, staring into the empty space. The initial shock had passed, replaced by a dull, persistent ache and a single burning question that drilled into my mind. Why? Why would Michael, the son I had poured all my love into, treat me this way? What had I done wrong in raising him? Had my unconditional love turned him into a weak man, easily manipulated and willing to sacrifice his own mother to please his wife? A soft knock on the door pulled me from my spiraling thoughts. "Linda, are you awake?" Sam's voice came through, still calm and respectful. "I've made some breakfast. Whenever you're ready, please come out to the living room." I took a deep breath, trying to pull myself together. Falling apart now wouldn't solve anything. Sam was right. This was a war, and I needed to be strong. I went into the bathroom, and the warm water helped clear my head a little. When I walked out to the living room, the rich aroma of fresh coffee and newly baked croissants filled the air. Sam was standing by the window, a coffee cup in hand, quietly watching the city awaken. He was dressed in casual but elegant clothes, looking relaxed. "Good morning," he said, turning to smile at me. "Did you sleep well?" "Thank you. I'm fine," I replied, a harmless little lie. We sat at a small dining table that looked directly out at the mountain range. The breakfast was simple but perfectly prepared. Sam didn't press me about my feelings. Instead, he talked about the plan for the day. "After you've finished eating," he began, "we're going to see Attorney Carter. He was your family's lawyer for many years, a man Walter trusted implicitly. We need him." I nodded. Attorney Carter, an older, meticulous, and somewhat stoic man who had witnessed nearly every major milestone in my family's life, from the founding of Walter's company to the drafting of his will. In this storm, he was one of the few reliable anchors I could cling to. "What are we going to ask him to do?" I asked. "We're going to request a full and detailed review of all assets, the terms of Walter's will, and every financial transaction related to your inheritance over the last 2 years," Sam explained, his eyes growing sharp. "My gut tells me that them pushing you out of the house wasn't just because it was cramped. Usually, actions like that are driven by a deeper motive, and that motive is almost always money." Sam's words were like a bucket of cold water dumped on my head. I had never considered that possibility. As much as it pained me to be abandoned by my son, I had never doubted his honesty when it came to finances. Michael might be weak, but deceiving his mother to seize her assets? The thought was too monstrous, too foreign to the image of the son I once knew. But then, the image of Jessica in her expensive silk dress and sparkling diamond earrings flashed in my mind. Her bottomless greed might have been the catalyst that turned my son into a different person. An hour later, we were at Attorney Carter's office. The place was the complete opposite of Sam's modern penthouse or my minimalist home. It was a classic, somber, and dignified space. The walls were paneled with dark oak, floor-to-ceiling shelves were filled with old leather-bound law books, and the air smelled of old paper and the kind of trust built over decades. It felt like a fortress of law and order, a world where the truth still mattered. Attorney Carter received us in his private office. He had aged quite a bit since I last saw him. His hair was completely white, and deep lines were etched on his wise forehead. But his eyes, behind a pair of tortoiseshell glasses, were as sharp and perceptive as ever. He seemed incredibly surprised to see me with Sam Harrison, but his professionalism kept him from asking any prying questions. He invited us to sit, and his secretary quickly brought in tea. "Mrs. Hayes," Mr. Carter began, his voice tinged with concern. "It's good to see you, but I have a feeling this visit isn't for a happy reason." I took a breath to speak, but my throat tightened up. Sam gently placed a hand on my shoulder, a reassuring gesture, and spoke for me. "Good morning, Mr. Carter. I'm Sam Harrison, an old friend of Walter's," he introduced himself. "We are here today regarding a very serious matter. Linda was forced to leave her own home by her son, Michael, yesterday morning." Attorney Carter's face hardened. The initial surprise was quickly replaced by a grave and deeply concerned expression. He took off his glasses and wiped them slowly, a habit of his whenever he was faced with a complex problem. "Forced to leave," he repeated, emphasizing each word. "Could you please elaborate, Mrs. Hayes?" I took a deep, steadying breath, and this time I found my voice. In a flat monotone, trying to suppress all emotion, I recounted the entire event from Sunday morning. I told him about Jessica's words, Michael's silence, and the pre-packed suitcase by the door. I didn't cry. I didn't condemn. I simply stated the facts in the barest way possible. When I finished, a heavy silence fell over the room. Attorney Carter looked at me, his eyes filled with sympathy and a suppressed anger. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "If Walter knew about this." He left the sentence unfinished, but we all knew what he meant. Sam picked up the thread, steering the conversation back to the main objective. "So, Mr. Carter, we need your help. We would like to request a comprehensive financial investigation. We need to know everything. Every account, every stock, every transaction made under Linda's name or related to the assets Walter left her. I understand. Mr. Carter nodded, putting his glasses back on. His expression was now one of pure focus, like a general preparing for battle. I will need a signed power of attorney from you, Mrs. Hayes. As soon as I have it, I'll begin immediately. I'll have my team go over every number, every piece of paper. This process could take a few days. We have time, Sam said firmly. Be thorough, sir. Don't miss a single detail, no matter how small. After signing the necessary papers, we left the law office. Stepping out into the sunlight, I felt as though an invisible burden had been shared, entrusting the matter to a professional as reliable as Mr. Carter made me feel a little lighter. At least I wasn't fumbling in the dark alone anymore. The next few days passed in a state of tense anticipation. Sam did his best to keep my mind occupied. He took me for walks in quiet parks, telling me funny stories about Walter in his younger days that I had never heard before. We cooked together, read books in comfortable silence. He treated me with a pure, respectful friendship, completely devoid of any romantic intentions. Our relationship was built on a shared memory and loyalty to a man who was gone. Gradually, I began to feel less like someone being helped and more like a partner in an alliance forged by friendship. But no matter how peaceful the days were, the nights brought back the anxiety that gnawed at me. What if Sam was wrong? What if the investigation found nothing unusual, and my only pain was simply being abandoned by my son? In some ways, that would be even more painful. On the fourth day, in the afternoon, the phone rang. It was Attorney Carter. Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Harrison. His voice sounded tired and strained over the phone. I found a few things. They're disturbing. I think we need to meet. Can you both come to my office tomorrow morning at 9? My heart clenched. Disturbing. That single word hung in the air, heralding a coming storm. The next morning, we were once again sitting in Attorney Carter's oak-paneled office, but the atmosphere this time was completely different. The usual formal calm was replaced by a tension that was almost palpable. On Mr. Carter's large desk, instead of its usual neatness, were stacks of files, bank statements, and stock transaction charts covered in red ink. Mr. Carter's face was gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes, evidence of sleepless nights. He didn't beat around the bush. After we sat down, he pushed a thick file toward us. This was the investment portfolio that Walter set up specifically for you, Linda, he began, his voice low. It consisted mainly of stocks in leading technology companies Walter saw potential in very early on. As of 2 years ago, the total value of this portfolio was approximately $2.5 million. He paused, looking directly at me. Do you remember what Michael told you about these stocks? I nodded, my throat dry. He said the market was volatile and that the stocks had lost most of their value, that they were practically worthless now. Attorney Carter let out a long, heavy sigh, one filled with disappointment and disgust. He flipped to another page in the file, which showed a detailed chart. That was a lie, Linda, a bald-faced lie. He pointed to the chart. This is the transaction history for that portfolio. Michael, using the power of attorney you signed for him a few years ago for management convenience, didn't sell off the stocks during a crisis. On the contrary, he sold them off slowly, methodically, over the past 18 months, and nearly every transaction was made when the stocks were at or near their peak value. My head was spinning. I tried to focus on the numbers, the lines on the paper, but they just looked like meaningless symbols. So, the money, where did it go? Sam asked, his voice as cold as ice. Attorney Carter flipped to a series of bank statements. This is the worst part, he said. The money from the stock sales was transferred into a joint account belonging to Michael and Jessica. From there, large sums were withdrawn. A portion, nearly $1 million, was funneled directly into Michael's private company, likely to bail out his failing business. The rest. He pushed a stack of credit card bills and other transfer receipts toward us. The rest was used to fund a lavish lifestyle, a new sports car for Jessica, diamond jewelry, trips to Europe, and 5-star resorts. They were basically living like royalty on your retirement money. A deathly silence filled the room. It felt as if all the air had been sucked out of my lungs. Every word from the lawyer was like a sledgehammer blow, one after another. This was no longer just weakness. This wasn't the impulsive act of a son goaded by his wife. This was a calculated, systematic deception that had been going on for years. My son had looked me in the eye and lied about the money his father had saved for me, while he and his wife were squandering that very money. The pain of being kicked out of my home now seemed trivial compared to this betrayal. Being evicted hurt me, but this deception killed a part of my soul. It completely destroyed the image of the son I loved. The man who did this was not my Michael. He was a stranger, a greedy monster wearing my son's face. I didn't cry. The shock was too great. It had frozen my tears. I just felt a cold, hollow emptiness, a bottomless pit opening up beneath me. I felt a steady hand on my arm. It was Sam. He said nothing, but his presence, that firm, reassuring grip, kept me from collapsing. I looked up at him and saw in his eyes not pity, but a controlled, burning rage. His eyes were like steel, and I knew he was angry for me and for his departed friend. Sam turned to Attorney Carter, his voice deep and powerful. "Is this evidence solid enough to take to court, Carter?" "More solid than steel," the lawyer confirmed. "It's all on paper, it's undeniable." Sam nodded, a single decisive nod. He turned back to me, and this time, in his eyes, I saw a promise. "Walter didn't leave you a will," he said, his voice firm. "He left you a weapon, and now it's time we used it." The air in Attorney Carter's office was thick, heavy as lead. His words, more solid than steel, still hung there, echoing in the deathly silence. I sat frozen in the leather chair, feeling as if I'd been shoved off a cliff and was free-falling into an endless void. The brutal truth of Michael's actions wasn't just a shock, it was an earthquake that shattered the very foundation of my trust. The image of my beloved son had disintegrated into a million pieces, replaced by the portrait of a cold-blooded fraud, a thief wearing a familiar face. Sam's hand remained on my shoulder, a steady anchor in the storm raging inside me. The anger in his eyes was undisguised, but it was a controlled, cold, and focused anger, like a whetted blade ready for battle. He was the embodiment of the fury Walter would have felt if he were still alive. "A weapon!" I repeated Sam's words, my voice a hoarse whisper. "What do you mean?" Instead of answering me, Sam turned to Attorney Carter. "Mr. Carter, did Walter ever mention any special provisions in his will? Anything unusual, a codicil, a private directive, anything designed for a situation just like this one?" Attorney Carter frowned, deep in thought. He steepled his fingers, tapping them lightly on the oak desk. He was the personification of caution and meticulousness. To him, a client's will was a sacred text, and he remembered every detail. "Walter's official will was quite straightforward," he said slowly. "The assets were clearly divided. A third to you, Linda, including full ownership of the house and the investment portfolio we just discussed. The remainder, including the controlling stake in the family company, was transferred to Michael, with a few conditions about maintaining the business. Everything was very standard." A wave of disappointment washed over me. Perhaps Sam was mistaken. Perhaps Walter, as brilliant as he was, couldn't have foreseen the corruption of his own son. But Sam didn't give up. "Are you sure, Carter?" Walter wasn't a standard man. He always had a backup plan for his backup plans. Think carefully. Could there have been a separate envelope, a sealed instruction, something to be opened only under special circumstances? A flicker of recognition suddenly sparked in Attorney Carter's eyes. He seemed to remember something. Without a word, he stood up and walked over to a massive, multi-locked safe in the corner of the room. He carefully turned the combination dial, the dry clicks echoing in the quiet space. The heavy steel door swung open, revealing neatly labeled drawers. He pulled out a drawer marked Walter Hayes, Personal and Testamentary Files. He rummaged through the drawer for a long moment. The rustling of paper seemed to amplify the tension in the room. Finally, he withdrew a large folder containing the original will I was familiar with. But clipped to the back of it was something I had never seen before. It was a thick, sturdy vellum envelope, the color of aged ivory. It was carefully sealed with a dark red wax seal, imprinted with the Hayes family crest that Walter had designed long ago. Across the envelope, a single line was handwritten in black ink in my husband's unmistakable, strong, and decisive script. Codicil to the last will and testament of Walter Hayes. To be opened only in the presence of attorney Timothy Carter and Linda Hayes, and only upon clear and irrefutable evidence of Linda Hayes's financial interests being compromised or of her being treated unjustly by Michael Hayes, resulting in her forced departure from her primary residence. My heart stopped beating. I stared at those words. Each one was written like a prophecy, a provision from beyond the grave. Walter had known. Somehow, he had seen it all. He had foreseen our son's weakness and our daughter-in-law's greed. He had not left me alone and defenseless. Tears began to well up, but this time they weren't tears of sorrow, but of boundless love and gratitude. He was still here, still protecting me, even after he was gone. Attorney Carter held the envelope, his expression a mixture of astonishment and deep respect. "Good heavens," he whispered. "Walter, he really did think of everything." He looked at me, then at Sam, his eyes communicating that the conditions for opening this envelope had been met perfectly. He carefully used a letter opener to slice through the wax seal. A hush fell over the room as he withdrew a single sheet of paper, folded into quarters. He unfolded it, laid it on the desk, and began to read aloud, his voice trembling slightly with emotion. The document inside wasn't long, but every word was drafted with tight, precise, and legally unassailable language. It was a masterpiece of calculation and foresight. Its contents were, in essence, a legal time bomb. The codicil stipulated that, in the event the conditions outlined on the envelope are met, that is to say, Linda's interests are compromised or she is forced from her home, the following clauses will take immediate and automatic effect. All assets inherited by Michael Hayes under this will, including but not limited to the 70% controlling stake in the Hayes Family Company, real estate properties, and other valuable assets, will be immediately frozen. All voting rights, management authority, and any benefits arising from these frozen assets will be immediately transferred to an independent third party, operating as a temporary trust. The sole individual with the full and exclusive authority to select, appoint, and oversee the operations of this third-party trust manager is my lifelong friend and business partner, Mr. Sam Harrison. When Attorney Carter finished the last line, the room seemed to explode in silence. I was dumbfounded. This wasn't a normal clause in a will. This was a perfect trap, an ultimate protection mechanism. Walter hadn't just disinherited Michael as a punishment. He had done something far more brilliant. He had stripped him of control. He placed Michael's entire financial future, the entire career built on the family's foundation, into the hands of the one man he trusted most in the world, Sam Harrison. I turned to look at Sam. His face showed not surprise, but a deep understanding, mixed with an infinite admiration for his friend. Perhaps he had suspected Walter would do something like this, but the perfect, ruthless precision of the plan was still beyond his imagination. "Walter was a damn genius," Sam said, his voice low and full of emotion. "He didn't just punish, he gave us the power to decide. He placed the scales of justice in our hands." Attorney Carter, after a moment of shock, quickly regained his professional composure. He reread the codicil, his experienced lawyer's eyes scanning every detail. "This document is completely legal and cannot be challenged," he confirmed. "It was written when Walter was of sound mind, signed by him and 2 witnesses. It's attached to the original will. Legally, it's airtight. When we present the evidence of Mrs. Hayes being forced from her home and Michael's embezzlement of the stock funds, no court on earth would refuse to enforce this clause." The power of what had just happened began to sink in. From a victim stripped of everything, I had suddenly become the one holding the fate of my own tormentor. The trap Walter had set years ago was now ready to spring. The feeling of helplessness vanished, replaced by an overwhelming sense of the power that had just been placed in my hands. But with it came a heavy burden of responsibility. Walter didn't want to destroy Michael. As I would later read in a letter he left, he wanted to teach our son a lesson. This was the tool to teach that lesson. "So, what do we do next?" I asked, my voice still shaky. Sam looked at me, his gaze firm. "Next, We let them know that we know. We won't attack loudly. We'll act like Walter would have quietly, precisely, and lethally. He turned to Attorney Carter. Mr. Carter, please draft a legal letter. No need to mention the details of this codicil just yet. Simply inform Michael Hayes that we, as legal representatives for Mrs. Linda Hayes, have discovered serious irregularities in the management of her inheritance, specifically the unauthorized liquidation of a stock portfolio valued at $2.5 million. Request an urgent meeting to discuss this matter. Is that all? Mr. Carter asked, a bit surprised. That's all, Sam confirmed. We'll toss a small pebble and see how the water ripples. Let their panic and guilt do the rest of the work. We'll keep this trap as our ace in the hole, to be revealed only at the decisive moment. I understood Sam's meaning. This was a psychological blow, a warning, a chance to see how Michael and Jessica would react when they knew their secret was out. Walter's plan wasn't just about the law, it was about testing human nature. Leaving the lawyer's office that day, I felt like a different person. I was no longer Linda, the weak widow kicked out of her home. I was Linda, the executor of Walter's final wish, holding a power that could determine the fate of an entire fortune. The weight on my shoulders was still there, but it was no longer the weight of despair, but the weight of justice waiting to be served. The lawyer's letter, just as Sam had predicted, was a small pebble tossed into a still pond. But instead of creating gentle ripples, it stirred up a monster lurking in the depths. The days after the letter was sent were the longest of my life. I lived in a state of tense anticipation, a suffocating silence enveloping the luxurious penthouse. Every phone ring, every distant ding of the elevator made my heart leap into my throat. I kept replaying the coming confrontation in my mind. Would Michael call, screaming, denying, or would he break down in remorse? What would I say? Would I be strong enough to face the son I now both loved and resented? Sam saw my restlessness. He didn't try to distract me with small talk. Instead, he simply stayed by my side, his presence a priceless tranquilizer. We spent hours sitting on the balcony, watching the clouds drift over the Rocky Mountains, each lost in our own thoughts, but still feeling connected. He told me that in any confrontation, the first person to lose their cool is the one who loses. Jessica and Michael, upon receiving the letter, were surely in a state of panic. Our silence was our most potent weapon now. It sowed fear and uncertainty in their minds, forcing them to expose their own weaknesses. And then, one late afternoon, as the sunset painted the sky in shades of purple, my phone rang. The screen displayed, "Michael." My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at Sam, who gave me a slight nod, his eyes telling me to stay calm. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my breathing, then swiped to answer. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "Mom." Michael's voice on the other end was not one of remorse. It was a chaotic mix of fear and anger. "What the hell are you doing? Your lawyer sent me a letter. He's slandering me. He's saying I took your money." I remained silent, letting him talk. Each of his accusations felt like a whip against my self-respect. He didn't ask how I was, offered no apology. His first reaction was to deny and attack. "Michael," I said, my voice so cold it surprised even me. "Mr. Carter isn't slandering anyone. He's just stating the facts from the paperwork. You sold all of my stocks. You took $2.5 million. That is the truth." "It's not like that," he yelled, the panic in his voice now unmistakable. "It's a misunderstanding. I was just temporarily restructuring the portfolio. The market is risky. I was protecting your assets." The lies were clumsy and shameless. He still saw me as a senile old woman, ignorant about finances, easily fooled by meaningless jargon. An infinite sadness washed over me. My son wasn't just a thief, he was a coward. "Stop lying, Michael," I said, my voice void of emotion. "I've seen all the statements. I know where the money went. It went into your company, into Jessica's account, on vacations, on cars. Jessica has nothing to do with this," he cut in hastily, a knee-jerk reaction to protect his wife. She was just worried about me. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. You just sit there and judge." "I'm not judging, Michael. I just want back what is mine." There was a moment of silence on the other end. I could hear his heavy breathing. And then I heard another voice whispering nearby. Jessica's voice. The serpent was right there, hissing poison into my son's ear, directing his every word. "You need to stop this." Michael's voice returned, but this time with an undercurrent of threat. "If you keep this up, you're going to regret it. You're destroying your own family." And then he hung up. The long dial tone echoed, leaving a cold emptiness. I put the phone down, my hand shaking. That call had confirmed the worst. There was no remorse, no repentance, only the fear of being exposed and a brazen threat. Sam had overheard the entire conversation. "This is exactly what I expected," he said calmly. "They're cornered, and a cornered animal becomes dangerous. They won't just sit back and take this. Jessica especially will fight back." I could never have imagined that her counterattack would come so quickly and be so venomous. 2 days later, I was in the kitchen, trying to focus on kneading a batch of bread dough, an old habit that helped calm my nerves when the doorbell rang. Sam answered it. I heard a brief exchange, and then he came back in, his face grim, holding a large manila envelope. "A process server just delivered this for you, Linda," he said, his voice low. My heart plummeted. I took the envelope with trembling hands. It felt light, but weighed 1,000 pounds. Inside was a stack of legal documents. On the very first line, I read the words that made my blood run cold. "Petition for an emergency restraining order." Petitioner: Jessica Hayes. Respondent: Linda Hayes. I read on, shaking. Every sentence in the petition was a grotesque distortion of the truth, a web of sophisticated lies. Jessica accused me of being mentally unstable, of harassing behavior, and of being a negative influence on the development of the children. The petition claimed that I had repeatedly called and screamed uncontrollably at her, that I had threatened to ruin my son's life, that I suffered from a pathological jealousy of their happiness. The worst part was when she described me as a toxic grandmother who could inflict irreparable psychological damage on Leo and Sophia, the 2 grandchildren I loved more than life itself. How could she make this up?" I whispered, struggling to breathe. "Where's her proof?" And then I saw the attachment at the end, a transcribed audio recording. It was only then that I remembered a phone call from the day before. Jessica had called me. Her voice, at first, had been strangely sweet. "Hi, Mom," she had said. "I just wanted to call and see if you were okay. Michael told me you were very upset. I'm worried about your health." Her hypocrisy made me sick. "You don't need to worry about me," I had replied coldly. "Don't be like that," she continued, her voice full of fake hurt. "I know you don't like me. I know you think I stole Michael from you. But you have to understand. Michael is exhausted. The burden of caring for an elderly, constantly unhappy mother. It's been really hard on him." A burden? I couldn't hold it in any longer? I'm a burden to him after everything I sacrificed for him? Sacrifice or control? Jessica's voice turned sharp. "You never let him be free. And now that he finally has a family of his own, you want to destroy it. You are a selfish mother." That sentence ignited the rage I had been suppressing for so long. I lost control. I screamed into the phone, calling her a gold digger, a snake, the person who had ruined my son. I said things that now, reading them in black and white, I deeply regretted. I hadn't realized I was walking straight into her trap. The entire call had been recorded. Only my screaming was there. Her provocations had been cleverly edited out. The recording, taken out of context, painted me as a hateful, hysterical old woman. Tears streamed down my face. I collapsed onto the sofa, the petition falling to the floor. This was the cruelest blow. It wasn't aimed at my money. It was aimed at the most precious thing in my life, my love for my grandchildren. She wanted to strip me of my right to be a grandmother. She wanted to paint a distorted, evil picture of me in the eyes of my innocent grandchildren. "She's won, Sam," I sobbed, feeling as though all my will to fight had shattered. "She's taken everything from me, my home, my money, and now my grandchildren." The court, based on the emergency evidence Jessica provided, had issued a temporary restraining order. I was forbidden from going within 100 yards of Michael, Jessica, and my grandchildren until a formal hearing could be held. 100 yards. A distance that seemed so small but was an impassable chasm, separating me from the ones I loved most. Sam picked up the petition and scanned it, his face like ice. He didn't offer any empty platitudes. He sat down next to me, waiting until my sobs subsided. "Linda, look at me," he said, his voice deep and steady. "This is not her victory. This is an act of desperation. She's doing this because she knows she can't win the financial fight. She knows we have the evidence against Michael. So she's moved to a different, dirtier battlefield. She wants to hurt you, to break you down mentally so you'll give up." He took my hand, and his firm grip gave me a sliver of strength. "Don't let her have that. The pain you're feeling is real. Your anger is real. Use it. Turn it into fuel. Walter didn't set up such a perfect trap just to see you surrender to the cheap tricks of a greedy woman." I looked up at him, at the unshakable resolve in his eyes. He was right. Jessica had hit my weakest point, but for that very reason, I couldn't back down. This was no longer a fight for money. This was a fight to protect my honor, to win back the right to love my grandchildren, and to prove that I was not the monster Jessica was trying to make me out to be. The days after I received the court order were shrouded in silence. The luxurious penthouse, with its sweeping view of the sky, suddenly felt like a prison of glass and steel. I felt like a bird in a gilded cage, able to see the free sky and the majestic mountains, but unable to fly to them. Every morning, the first thought that entered my mind wasn't the beautiful sunrise, but that invisible 100-yard line, a legal chasm that separated me from Leo and Sophia. Their smiles, their clear voices, their little arms wrapped around my neck, all those simple things were now forbidden luxuries. This pain was different. It wasn't the sharp, tearing pain I felt when I was kicked out of my home or when I discovered the financial betrayal. This was a dull, gnawing ache, a poison that seeped slowly into every cell, paralyzing my will. Jessica had succeeded. She had struck my most vulnerable spot, the heart of a grandmother, and made me bleed from the inside out. Sam's words of encouragement still echoed in my ears, but during the long, sleepless nights, the voice of reason grew faint against the screams of a broken heart. I began to doubt myself. Maybe I really was a terrible mother. Maybe I had screamed like a lunatic. Jessica's tactic was so insidious because it didn't just make others doubt me, it made me doubt myself. I spent most of my days sitting quietly by the window, watching the bustling traffic below like mindless ants, each car a story, a family to which I no longer belonged. Sam respected my silence. He didn't try to force me to be cheerful or offer empty advice. He was simply there, his presence a quiet affirmation that I was not alone. Sometimes he would place a hot cup of chamomile tea beside me or quietly play a soft classical piece that Walter used to love. In these wordless gestures, I felt the most sincere and profound care. One gray afternoon, as dark clouds gathered over the mountains, signaling an approaching storm, Sam walked into the living room. He said nothing, just quietly placed an object on the coffee table in front of me. It was an old wooden box. It wasn't large, perhaps just big enough to hold a few books. The dark cherry wood had aged to a deep, warm tone, its grain clearly visible, and the corners were worn smooth from years of being moved. The brass latch was tarnished but still looked sturdy. I looked at the box, then up at Sam, my eyes full of questions. "Walter gave me this box," Sam said, his voice deep and solemn. "It was about a week before he passed. He was in his hospital bed, very weak, but his mind was as sharp as ever. He told me to keep it safe, and to only give it to you when the time was truly right." He paused, looking directly into my eyes. "I think, Linda, that time is now." My heart gave a powerful thud. A final keepsake from Walter, a final message entrusted to his most loyal friend. My trembling hand reached for the box. My fingers traced the smooth wood, feeling a familiar warmth as if a part of his spirit still lingered there. Sam placed a small, old-fashioned key in my palm. "He said you would know what to do with it," Sam said, then quietly took a few steps back, giving me some privacy. My hand was shaking so badly it took me a moment to fit the key into the lock. A small click echoed. I took a deep breath and slowly opened the lid. A familiar scent wafted up to me, the smell of cedarwood, old paper, and the faint hint of the cologne Walter always wore. Inside the box, lined with faded, deep blue velvet, were not valuable assets. They were the fragments of a life, the treasures of memory. On top lay a yellowed black and white photograph. It was Walter and me on our wedding day. He was handsome in his tuxedo, and I was demure in my white wedding gown, both of us smiling brightly, our eyes sparkling with happiness and hope for the future. Next to the photo was a tiny velvet pouch. I opened it, and inside was Michael's first baby tooth, tiny and pearly white. I had saved it as a keepsake, never knowing Walter had kept it so carefully. Underneath that was a dried, withered red rose, its petals as fragile as paper. For our 20th anniversary, Walter had given me a bouquet of vibrant red roses, and this was the one he had saved. These mementos didn't bring me pain. On the contrary, they were like warm streams of water nourishing my parched soul. They reminded me of a love that was real, of a family that was once whole and happy. They were proof that everything happening now was just a nightmare, a deviation from the right path. And then, at the very bottom, lying neatly on the velvet lining, was an envelope. It was made of the fine, thick, cream-colored stationery Walter always used. There was no address, just a single line written in his familiar, strong, and loving handwriting, "To Linda, my love." My tears began to fall. I carefully picked up the letter, feeling the texture of the paper as if it were the touch of his hand. My heart pounded, a mix of anticipation and fear. This was a voice from the other side, a final message. I slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a sheet of paper, handwritten on both sides. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my heaving chest, and began to read. "My dearest love, if you are reading this letter, it means that my greatest fear has come to pass, and for that, first and foremost, I want to apologize. I am sorry I could not be there to protect you. I am sorry for leaving you with a burden, a fight you should never have had to face. You are probably wondering why I did all of this, why there was a secret codicil in the will. The answer is simple, Linda. I saw it. A father's love could not blind me to the truth. I saw the weakness in Michael's core. Our son is not a bad person by nature, but he is weak. He craves approval and fears failure. He is like a ship without a rudder, easily swept away by strong winds. And Jessica, she is that storm. I saw it the very first time Michael brought her home. Behind those beautiful eyes and that sweet smile was a sharp mind hiding an empty, greedy heart. She doesn't love Michael for who he is. She loves the Hayes name, the wealth and status it could bring her. I knew that once I was gone, Michael's weakness and Jessica's greed would be a deadly combination, and you, my love, would be the one standing in the middle of that storm. I thought about it for a long, long time. I could have disinherited Michael, but that would have only pushed him deeper into Jessica's arms and destroyed him completely. I didn't want that. He is still our son. Instead, I chose to create a tool, a weapon, and place it in the hands of the only person in this world I truly trust you. That codicil is not for revenge, my love. It is a test, an expensive lesson. It was designed to be triggered only when Michael had gone too far, when he had forgotten what family and right and wrong truly mean. Use it, Linda. Do not hesitate. Use it to protect yourself, to take back what belongs to you. But more importantly, use it to teach our son a lesson, to force him to face the consequences of his own choices, to give him a chance to find the man we raised him to be. I have asked Sam, our most loyal friend, to help you. Trust him, as you once trusted me. Together, the two of you will be strong enough to get through this. Do not be afraid, my love, and never think you are alone. My love did not end with my last breath. It is always here, in these mementos, in the home we built together, and in your heart. Be strong, my Linda. Fight. For you, for me, and for the future of our family. Loving you forever, Walter. By the time I read the last words, my tears had blurred the ink. I bowed my head, clutching the letter to my heart, and sobbed. But these were not the tears of despair or humiliation anymore. They were tears of release, of understanding, of a great love that transcended even death. Walter hadn't abandoned me. He had foreseen it all. All my pain, all my self-doubt, was understood and soothed by his words. The letter wasn't just an explanation, it was an invisible current of strength, a warm energy flowing into my cold soul. It was permission, it was guidance, it was the compass for the road ahead. A profound change occurred within me. The blind rage and numbing pain subsided, replaced by something sharper and clearer, a purpose. I was no longer a victim tossed about by the currents of life. I was Walter's chosen executor, the one to carry out his final plan. This fight was no longer just mine. I was fighting for him, too. I slowly raised my head and dried my tears. I looked at Sam. He had been standing there, quietly watching me the whole time. His eyes were full of sympathy, but also an expectation. "I'm ready," I said, and for the first time in days my voice was steady and strong. Sam gave a slight nod, a rare, relieved smile gracing his face. "I knew you would be." I carefully folded the letter, placed it back in the box with the other keepsakes, and closed the lid. The dry click of the brass latch sounded like an oath. All hesitation was gone. All weakness was left behind. Now, all that remained within me was a cold, steely resolve. "They made a fatal mistake, Sam," I said, my eyes watching the storm as it began to shed its first drops of rain on the city below. They thought they were fighting a lonely old woman. They were wrong. That afternoon's thunderstorm seemed to wash clean not just the sky, but my soul. The next morning, I awoke with a clarity and calm I hadn't felt since the day Walter died. The pain was still there, a deep scar that would never fully heal, but it was no longer an open, festering wound that paralyzed me. It had now hardened, becoming part of my core, a cold but powerful source of energy. Walter's letter hadn't just given me a purpose, it had given me back to myself. I no longer sat listlessly by the window. Instead, I called Attorney Carter before Sam had even finished brewing the morning coffee. "Mr. Carter," I said, my voice firm and unwavering, "this is Linda Hayes. I want to schedule a meeting. Immediately. Me, you, and Mr. Harrison. We need to map out our next move." There was a brief pause on the other end. Perhaps Mr. Carter was surprised by the change in my tone. "Of course, Mrs. Hayes," he replied, his professionalism quickly taking over. "How about 10 o'clock this morning at my office?" 10 o'clock. We'll be there." When I hung up, Sam looked at me with a rare, approving smile. "Now that's the Linda that Walter was always so proud of," he said. This meeting at the lawyer's office had a completely different feel. It was no longer a painful investigation or a shocking revelation. It was a war council. We sat around the large oak table, not as a victim and her helpers, but as three allies, three generals planning a decisive battle. Walter's portrait wasn't there, but I felt his presence more clearly than ever, as if he were sitting at the head of the table, nodding in approval of our every plan. I was the one who started the meeting. "Gentlemen," I said, looking each of them in the eye, "I have read the letter Walter left for me. I understand his intentions completely. He didn't want to destroy Michael. He wanted to teach him a lesson so he could grow up. Our plan must follow that spirit. It must be strong, decisive, but it must also leave open a path for redemption." Attorney Carter nodded, his expression full of respect. "I completely agree, ma'am. Walter's codicil is the perfect tool for that purpose. It doesn't permanently disinherit, it freezes and transfers management. It creates an immense amount of leverage." Sam spoke next, the strategic vision of a seasoned businessman evident in his words. "Jessica's first attack was psychological, aimed at you, Linda. She wanted to break you down so you would give up. Therefore, our counterattack must also be psychological, but on a whole different level. We're not going to argue about the restraining order just yet. That's a side skirmish. We will strike directly at their headquarters, at the thing they care about most, money and power." "So what do we do?" I asked. "File a lawsuit immediately?" "No," Sam shook his head. "Going to court is noisy, time-consuming, and it gives them time to prepare. Walter wouldn't act that way. His moves were always surprising, precise, and fatal. We'll do it his way." He turned to Attorney Carter. "Mr. Carter, I want you to draft a formal legal notice, not a typical warning letter. This needs to be a document that cannot be ignored. Send it via a reputable courier, requiring a signature confirmation from Michael Hayes himself. "What will the notice contain?" Mr. Carter asked, his pen poised. "The content will be very simple," Sam said, his eyes as cold as steel. "We will not accuse or threaten. We will simply state the facts. Start by outlining the irrefutable evidence of Michael misusing his power of attorney to liquidate Linda's $2.5 million stock portfolio. Then, and this is the most critical part, we will quote word for word the entire codicil from Walter Hayes's will." I held my breath. The plan was audacious. It wasn't just a warning. It was a full reveal of the entire trap. Sam continued. "The notice will state that with two actions. 1. The misappropriation of financial assets, and 2. Forcing Mrs. Linda Hayes from her primary residence, all conditions for activating the codicil have been met. And finally, it will conclude that if we do not receive a satisfactory response within 48 hours, Attorney Carter will formally petition the court to enforce the freezing of all assets and transfer management to the designated appointee, me, Sam Harrison." A heavy silence filled the room after Sam finished. The plan was both ruthless and perfect. It gave Michael no room to maneuver. It didn't just warn of a coming storm. It placed a bomb on his desk and showed him the ticking clock. "I'll draft it immediately," Mr. Carter said, his voice full of excitement. "This will be one of the most interesting legal documents of my career." That afternoon, the envelope containing the bomb was sent. And then we waited again. But this wait was completely different. It wasn't anxious waiting. It was the waiting of a hunter who has set a trap and knows with absolute certainty that the prey will fall into it. I wasn't there, but I could picture the scene as vividly as if I were watching a movie. I imagined Michael sitting in his CEO's office, a luxurious space he owed to his father's legacy. A courier enters, hands him a stiff envelope. He probably signed for it nonchalantly, thinking it was just another contract. I pictured him slitting the envelope open with a letter opener, his face still smug. He starts to read. The first line about the $2.5 million portfolio probably made him frown. But when he got to the part quoting the codicil from his father's will, I'm certain the color drained from his face. Each word would have appeared before his eyes like a ghost from the past, rising up to pass judgment. Freeze all assets. Transfer management. Designated appointee. Sam Harrison. I could imagine the paper trembling in his hands, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead, the air in his lavish office suddenly becoming thick, unbreathable. His world, built on lies and inherited wealth, was crumbling before his very eyes. And then, as a reflex, he would do what he always did when he was in trouble. Call Jessica. I imagined that frantic phone call. "Jessica, it's over. It's all over." His voice cracking with panic. "What are you talking about, Michael? Calm down. Dad, it was Dad. He left a trap in the will. If Mom was forced out of the house, all of my assets get frozen. The whole company. And Sam Harrison takes over. Do you understand? Sam Harrison." I could see Jessica's beautiful face contorting with shock and rage. At first, she wouldn't believe it. Her arrogance wouldn't allow her to believe she'd been outsmarted by a dead man. "That's ridiculous. It's a bluff from that old woman. Don't you fall for it." But Jessica was a fox. She wouldn't blindly trust her own denial. I pictured her immediately calling her own lawyer, her voice tight with anger, demanding he check on it. And then, 15 minutes later, her lawyer calls back. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm sorry to report. I've checked with the probate court. There is a sealed codicil filed with the original will of Mr. Walter Hayes. Based on what you've told me, I'm afraid. It's legally ironclad." That would be the moment Jessica's arrogance shattered. She would scream, curse, throw things, but after the rage would come a primal fear. The fear of a parasite realizing its host is about to die, and everything it clings to is about to vanish into thin air. Meanwhile, in his office, Michael would slump into his chair. The letter from Attorney Carter lay on his desk like a death sentence. He finally understood. He wasn't just facing his mother's anger or the punishment of the law. He was facing the cold, brilliant calculation of his own father. Those 48 hours passed like a silent century. We received no frantic calls, no more threats. This silence was more terrifying than any scream. It was the silence of a storm gathering energy, the silence of people standing on the edge of a cliff, realizing there's no way back. I knew that somewhere in the city, Michael and Jessica were living through the worst moments of their lives. The arguments, the accusations, the panic and despair must have engulfed the lake house, turning it into a living hell. On the morning of the third day, with the 48-hour deadline just hours away, Attorney Carter called us. "Michael Hayes just called," he announced, his voice calm but unable to hide the tension. "He wants a meeting, all parties, him, his wife, and us, immediately. He said he wants to negotiate." "Negotiate," Sam repeated the word, a cold smile on his lips. "A drowning man doesn't get to negotiate. He can only beg for a life raft." He turned to me. "Are you ready, Linda? This will be the final battle." I nodded, my heart as calm as the sea before a storm. I was no longer afraid. I was no longer hesitant. I had only a clear determination, sharpened by pain and guided by Walter's love. "I've been ready for a long time," I replied. We chose Attorney Carter's office for the showdown. It was neutral ground, but highly symbolic. It was here that Walter's will was created, and it was here that his final plan would be executed. The large conference room, with its long oak table and dark leather chairs, radiated the solemn power of the law. Light streamed in from the large windows, illuminating the tiny dust motes dancing in the air, like secrets waiting to be exposed. We arrived early. Me, Sam, and Attorney Carter sat on one side of the long table. I sat in the center chair, at Sam's suggestion. He said this was my fight, and I should hold the position of power. Sam sat to my right, his calm, silent demeanor radiating a formidable strength. Attorney Carter was on my left, with stacks of files arranged neatly before him like a ready arsenal. We were a united front, an unbreakable alliance. Right on time, the door opened. Michael and Jessica walked in. Their appearance said it all. Michael looked like he had aged 10 years. His face was gray and gaunt, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep and anxiety. The expensive suit he wore looked rumpled, as if he'd been wearing it for 2 days straight. He couldn't look me in the eye, his gaze darting around the room like a trapped animal desperately searching for an escape. Jessica was different. Her appearance was still meticulously maintained, her blonde hair in a perfect bun, a designer business dress clinging to her figure, her makeup flawless. But that perfection couldn't hide the madness in her eyes. She looked like a beautiful porcelain doll with internal cracks, ready to shatter at any moment. Her usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw hostility and a face as taut as a violin string. She stared at me, her eyes blazing with a look that could kill. They sat on the opposite side, the space between us becoming an invisible battle line. No one said a word. The air in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner was a steady, rhythmic beat, like the hammer of an executioner. Finally, I was the one to break the silence. I had prepared what I was going to say. I had rehearsed it in my head 100 times. "We are here," I began, my voice clear and firm without a trace of a tremor, "because you, Michael, have made 2 grave mistakes. The first was stealing from your mother. The second, and fatal, mistake was underestimating your father." I paused, letting my words sink in. Michael flinched and finally looked up at me, his eyes full of guilt and fear. Jessica couldn't take it anymore. "Don't you stand there and lecture us," she hissed, her voice sharp and shrill. "Who do you think you are? A bitter old woman trying to destroy her own son's family." Sam just had to clear his throat, a deep and powerful sound, and it was enough to silence her. He said nothing, just gave her an ice-cold look that made it clear she was an insignificant player in this drama. I ignored Jessica's outburst. My eyes remained locked on Michael. "I'm not going to talk about the money anymore," I continued. "The lawyers can handle the numbers. Today we're here to talk about the future, your future. The future of the company your father spent his life building, and the future of my grandchildren." I took a deep breath and delivered the final blow, laying out the 2 options we had planned. "I am going to give you 2 paths to choose from, Michael, and you will choose only one. Option 1. You will immediately begin divorce proceedings with Jessica." Jessica's jaw dropped, her beautiful face twisting in shock and fury. She started to scream, but Michael shot out a hand and clamped it on her arm under the table. I went on, giving them no room to interrupt. After the divorce, you will agree to have Mr. Sam Harrison, as your father's designated appointee, oversee all company operations for a period of 2 years. All major financial decisions will require his approval. Finally, you and I will attend family therapy sessions together to repair what you have broken. I paused, looking him straight in the eye. If you agree to all of these terms, I will not immediately activate the codicil. I will give you a chance to start over. And the second option? Michael whispered, his voice hoarse. My gaze turned cold. The second option. You do nothing. You sit right there. And tomorrow Mr. Carter will file with the court. All your assets will be frozen. The company will be placed under Mr. Sam's management. You will lose everything. The company, the house, the money, and whatever shred of respect I have left for you. The choice was on the table, clear and cruel. One path was a thorny road to redemption, demanding sacrifice and humility. The other was total annihilation. No, absolutely not. Jessica finally broke free, jumping to her feet so fast her chair clattered to the floor behind her. You have no right. Michael is my husband. That company is mine too. You are a monster. She turned on Michael, grabbing his sleeves, shaking him frantically. Michael, say something. Don't let her do this to you. We'll hire the best lawyers. We'll sue her back. But Michael wasn't listening to Jessica anymore. He was looking at me, and in his eyes, I saw more than just fear. I saw something else, a complete internal collapse. The image of his strict but fair father, the man he both loved and feared, seemed to materialize, standing right behind me, looking at him with disappointed eyes. The judgment of his late father was more terrifying than any financial ruin. He finally saw it all. He saw that the woman beside him was nothing but a gold digger who had led him down a path of sin and now, in the face of failure, could only screech uselessly. He saw the brilliant trap his father had laid, and he saw that the only person offering him a way out, however narrow and difficult, was the mother he had cast aside. Slowly, he removed Jessica's hands from his arm. It was a decisive movement. It's over, Jessica, he said, his voice weak but clear. Then he turned to me, his eyes welling up with tears. For the first time in so many years, I saw the little, vulnerable boy I once knew. He bowed his head, a gesture of complete and utter surrender. He took a deep, shuddering breath, as if trying to push a heavy stone out of his chest. I choose you, Mom. Michael's words, I choose you, Mom, echoed in the conference room, not as a bold declaration, but as a sigh of surrender. It was the sound of a man who had been backed into a corner, stripped of every lie, and forced to face the raw truth about himself. In that moment, there were no winners. There was only a painful truth exposed and a fragile future waiting to be rebuilt from the ashes. Jessica's reaction was a sight to behold. Her beautiful face contorted into a mask of disbelief, fury, and pure hatred. She stared at Michael as if she couldn't believe what she'd heard. What? What did you just say? She stammered, her voice trembling. You choose her? Michael didn't look at her. He kept his head bowed, his eyes fixed on the polished table as if seeking forgiveness from his own reflection. His silence was a clearer answer than any words could be. You coward! Jessica shrieked, her shrill voice shattering the air. You're a weak, spineless coward. You were always living in your father's shadow, and now you're hiding behind your mother's skirt. I wasted the best years of my life on a man like you. She turned to me, her eyes blazing. And you, don't you dare look so smug. You may have won this battle, but you've lost your son forever. He will never forgive you for humiliating him like this. With that, she snatched her designer handbag, spun around, and stormed out of the room, the sharp clicks of her heels on the floor like the final shots in a lost war. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence. A relationship built on greed and lies had ended as quickly and as nakedly as it had begun. Michael remained motionless. His shoulders were shaking. I knew he wasn't crying for Jessica. He was crying for his own downfall, for the humiliation, for the guilt, and perhaps for a painful kind of release. Sam signaled to Attorney Carter. Mr. Carter, with his usual professionalism, gently pushed a prepared stack of documents toward Michael. "These are the necessary papers, Michael," he said, his tone devoid of any triumph, only the seriousness of the task at hand. "The divorce settlement, the transfer of temporary corporate oversight, and the schedule for family therapy. You can read them over or have your lawyer review them." Michael shook his head. "There's no need," he whispered. He picked up the pen and without reading a word, signed each page, his scrawled signature like a scar marking his defeat. After all the paperwork was done, I stood up. I didn't say anything else to Michael. The wounds were too fresh, and we both needed time. Sam and I quietly left the room, leaving Michael alone with the ruins he had created. The weeks and months that followed were a slow and difficult process of rebuilding. Everything happened as agreed. Jessica, realizing there was nothing left to gain, quickly signed the divorce papers. The prenuptial agreement Walter had wisely insisted upon years ago did its job. She received a small settlement, enough to start a new life, but not nearly enough to maintain the lavish lifestyle she was used to. She disappeared from our lives as quickly as she had entered, like a bad dream that finally ended at dawn. True to his word, Sam and his team took over the supervision of Michael's company. He didn't run it like a dictator. Instead, he acted as a strict mentor. He pointed out the management flaws Michael had created, cut the extravagant spending Jessica had introduced, and helped Michael restructure the company, putting it back on a path of sustainable growth based on the core values Walter had established. For the first time, Michael had to truly work, to be accountable for his decisions, all under the watchful eye of his father's best friend. It was a lesson in business and a lesson in life. The hardest part was the healing process between me and Michael. The restraining order was dropped as soon as Jessica withdrew her petition. The first reunion with my grandchildren was filled with tears and tight hugs. Leo and Sophia, in their innocence, knew nothing of the storm that had passed through our family. They were simply happy to see their grandma again. Their unconditional love became the first bridge across the chasm between me and their father. The first few family therapy sessions were excruciating. We sat across from each other in a sterile room, with a stranger listening to our story. The air was thick with unspoken words. Michael was drowning in guilt, and I was still haunted by the pain of betrayal. We talked about meaningless things, avoiding the real issue like it was a minefield. But slowly, with the therapist's skilled guidance, the walls of ice began to melt. During one session on a rainy afternoon, Michael finally managed to say the words, I'm sorry, Mom," he said, his voice cracking, unable to look at me. "I don't know why I did it. I was lost. I was weak. I let greed and vanity blind me. I disappointed Dad, and I hurt the one person who loved me most." For the first time, I didn't hear excuses in his voice. I heard genuine remorse, and at that moment, the fortress I had built around my heart began to crack. I didn't forgive him instantly. Forgiveness isn't a switch you can flip. It's a journey. But I had started on that path. "I know," was all I said. "And your father knows, too." We began to talk more, not just in the therapist's office. Michael started telling me about the pressure he felt, about living in Walter's enormous shadow, about how Jessica had exploited those insecurities to manipulate him. I began to open up too, telling him about my loneliness after Walter died, about the gut-wrenching pain of being cast out by my own son. We hadn't spoken so honestly with each other in years. We were learning how to be a mother and son again. The rebuilding wasn't just in our relationship. With my blessing, Sam helped me sell the house by the lake. The memories there were too tainted by sadness. We bought another house, smaller but cozier and closer to the city, with a lovely little garden where I could continue to grow Walter's roses. The money from the sale of the old house, plus the $2.5 million that Michael was required to pay back in installments under Mr. Carter's supervision, I put into a trust fund. A trust in the names of Leo and Sophia, to secure their education, to ensure they would never have to depend on anyone, and more importantly, to help them understand the value of preparation and foresight their grandfather had left behind. Things were slowly finding their rhythm. The broken pieces were being put back together, not to restore the original picture, but to create a new one, a picture with scars, but one that was stronger and more honest. The storm had passed, and though the landscape was changed, the sky was clearer than before. A year later, time had softened the deepest wounds, turning the painful, raised scars into faint, pale lines of memory. My life had found a new rhythm, a sense of peace I once thought was lost forever. I was sitting on the back porch of my new house, on the wooden swing that Sam had custom built for me, an almost perfect replica of the one Walter and I had. Before me was my small but vibrant garden. The velvet rose bushes, propagated from cuttings from the old garden, were stretching towards the golden late autumn sun, their blooms a rich, deep red. Their sweet fragrance mixed with the smell of damp earth from the morning's rain, creating the scent of peace and rebirth. A steady hand rested on my shoulder, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Sam. He handed me a steaming cup of chamomile tea and sat down in the wicker chair beside me. His hair had more silver in it now, but his eyes were just as sharp and his smile just as kind. "Thinking about Walter again?" he asked in his deep, warm voice. I smiled, a tranquil smile. Always. But now, when I think of him, I don't feel pain anymore. I just feel gratitude. My relationship with Sam, over the past year, had blossomed into something more precious than romance. It was a deep, abiding friendship. We were two old friends, connected by the invisible thread of memory and loyalty to a man who was gone. We didn't need flowery words. We shared quiet afternoons, hot tea, and rambling stories about Walter, about the past, about the lessons life had taught us. Sam had become an indispensable part of my life, a confidant, a comrade who had walked through the storm with me. He had repaid his debt to Walter, but in doing so, had forged a new bond, a steadfast friendship built on respect and understanding. The sound of children's giggles drifted from inside the house, breaking the quiet. Leo and Sophia came running out into the garden, their hands full of cookies they had just helped me bake. They threw themselves into my lap, their small arms wrapping around my neck, smelling sweetly of butter and sugar. "Grandma, look! I made a star cookie," Sophia announced, her dark eyes sparkling with pride. "And mine is a superhero," Leo chimed in. I hugged them both close, kissing their soft hair. Michael followed them out. He was no longer the gaunt, defeated man from a year ago. He had matured. The weakness was replaced by a quiet, steady confidence. When he looked at me, his eyes no longer held shame, but the warmth of affection and respect. Sam's 2-year supervision of the company was nearing its end. Under his guidance, Michael had learned to run the business responsibly. He had pulled the company back from the brink, not with tricks or schemes, but with hard work and integrity, the very values his father had championed. More importantly, he had learned how to be a father and a son. "Mom, your tea is getting cold," he said with a smile. "Let me go get you a fresh cup." It was a simple sentence, but it held a world of change. He was no longer the son who only took. He had learned how to care, how to give. Our relationship was mended, not by erasing the past, but by facing it and moving forward together. The therapy sessions had ended long ago, but our honest conversations continued, becoming a cherished part of every visit. The old lake house, the vessel of so much happiness and tragedy, had been sold to a young family. Sometimes, when I drove past, I'd see their children playing in the garden, and I felt no regret. That place belonged to an old chapter of my life. The trust fund in Leo and Sophia's names, created from the sale of the house and the money Michael was repaying, continued to grow. It was a solid guarantee for their future, a tangible legacy of the love and foresight of the grandfather they barely had a chance to know. The afternoon began to fade. Michael called the kids to get ready to leave. Before they went, he stopped in front of me and Sam. "Thank you, Uncle Sam," he said, his voice sincere. "For everything. You didn't just save the company, you saved my life." Sam just nodded, clapping him gently on the shoulder. "Your father would be proud of you, Michael. Keep living up to that." After Michael and the children left, the garden returned to its peaceful quiet. Sam and I sat together, watching the last streaks of sunlight disappear behind the trees. I looked around at my little garden, at my cozy house, and then at the dear friend sitting beside me. I realized something. Walter's protection was still all around me. It wasn't just in the clever financial trap he had set. It existed in the beautiful friendship he had left me. It was present in the hard-won maturity of our son, and it shone most brightly in the smiles of my grandchildren. I had lost a house, but I found a home. I had endured the deepest betrayal, but I learned how to forgive. I had thought I had lost everything, but in the end, I realized I had more than ever before. "He would have loved to see this, wouldn't he, Sam?" I whispered, my voice mingling with the rustling of the evening breeze. Sam smiled, his gaze far away. "I'm sure of it, Linda. He's smiling somewhere far away." And in that moment, I smiled too, a smile of true, profound peace. The war was over, and I was, at long last, home. Thank you for listening to the whole story. If you are connected with it, please like, share, and subscribe. Also, drop a comment below with your thoughts or your own story. Let's keep the empathy and sharing going.